Hi, I'm NiK Kacy, and I'm an out boss.
Hello, out entrepreneurs. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 40 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's show, we have NiK Kacy joining us all the way from sunny California, Los Angeles.
Woohoo.
So welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
Such
an honor.
Yeah, it's really great to have you here, and we're recording live in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is super hot in August. Would not recommend that. Maybe come back in February.
Right.
You're enjoying the conference so far?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming, lots to soak up, but really, really inspiring.
Yeah, it's great to meet awesome entrepreneurs like you. So are you ready to inspire fellow out bosses?
Hell yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, so a little bit about NiK. So NiK started the first gender-equal footwear accessories company 2 years ago. After leaving Google as a senior producer, they embarked on a journey to find shoes that fit not only on their feet, but also NiK's identity authentically. After realizing that the shoe industry recognized the niche, but didn't feel that it was quote-unquote worth it, NiK decided to start their own brand and design their own shoes for people of all identities, which I love. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
So to kick us off, NiK, can you tell us a little bit more about your business? And obviously it's super unique, so let us know a little bit more about what makes it unique.
Basically, this is inspired by like my own lifetime experience of not being able to find shoes that fit my identity and my gender expression, basically. And just decades and years of humiliation, basically, every time I want to go buy a pair of shoes. I'm being told to go to the women's section, or that, I was always like one size too small. And just realizing one day that I wasn't the only one in this world that had this experience. And so if I desperately wanted this and had this desire, there must be so many more of us out there, and that alone is already worth it. And so when I embarked on this journey and I talked to the people that were in the shoe industry, and they were like, yeah, we know there's this niche, but it's just not worth it for us. I just got really angry more than anything else. And I think that fire fueled the passion for like, well, then if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. So I left my job and I started designing all the shoes that I've ever wanted to wear. And I thought, worst case scenario is I have a new shoe wardrobe, And actually what ended up happening is like the more people I told that what I was doing, they were like, oh my God, like I've waited my whole life for that. And I think that just kept driving me to do more and more and branch out from not only just making shoes that I wanted, but actually making shoes for everybody and remove gender altogether from the idea, because shoes shouldn't have gender assigned to it. The person wearing it, they can decide. And even then, they can also choose not to have a gender assigned, right? And every day we should be able to wake up authentically and feel like, what's our style today? And be free and not limited to change as we evolve and grow. Not have society or fashion or somebody else tell us or dictate like what we should or should not wear.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And as an entrepreneur, you found your niche, like you found it. And despite like some of these bigger corporations that, as you said in your bio, this isn't worth it to us. It's not a big enough market. You're proving them wrong right now with the success of your company.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a lot of amazing things. I'm sure there's a lot of room for you to run in different directions. Like most entrepreneurs, we have the vision and sometimes we get distracted by squirrels or whatever. But I'm curious right now in this moment, what has you most fired up? What's kind of the thing right now that's lighting you up? You're waking up every morning, you're like, I can't wait to work on this. What is that?
I think it's kind of multi-layered. Like there's like the struggle, like, the early struggle is listed.
Oh yeah.
And it's like constantly like, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? Am I going to fail? Am I going to fail? Am I going to fail? Right? But at the same time, I also then like get emails from people who've bought my shoes or have ordered my shoes and who are waiting. And they're like, I'm so excited. These are going to be the best shoes ever. I've waited my whole life for this. And just things, getting that kind of encouragement. It's like they're part of the journey with me. It's not like a traditional entrepreneur or business client experience. This is like, we're family now. These are like lifelong friends now I have who are taking, like literally walking with me And it's been such an amazing journey that every morning I wake up, even for every moment that I think and I question myself, am I failing? Am I doing the right thing? Then I go back and I remember all of this other positive stuff that I've gained and all these friendships and relationships. And I realize, like, regardless, I've already succeeded. Yeah. You know, there is no failure in this because I've already achieved something I didn't realize I was going to. Yeah. You know, and then I look at when people told me that it wasn't worth it, and then now, like, you look at like Zara and all these big companies starting to make like gender neutral stuff. I'm like, oh, so now you see it's worth it, and now you want to use like your multi-million billion dollars and put like the rest of us like little companies out of business, which also fuels me to be like, work harder, work faster, come up with more innovative stuff, because gender neutral is not just like sweatpants.
Yeah. We were talking before the interview a little bit about gender, because that's always a fun topic to discuss, and just kind of how gender roles, in particular gender binaries, really confine many of us who are outside of LGBT communities, right? And we're at the NGLCC conference, so we've got the rainbow family here, but there's so many people who are straight, cisgender, gender conforming, that want your product, right? And I think that, like you said, those other companies are seeing the light, yet you've already established these relationships, right? And you talked about some of your customers as part of your family. Right. And I think that's so huge in just kind of recognizing some of the loyalty that comes when you serve communities that have been so ignored for so long. Right. So again, like you're ahead of the curve. And so that's pretty cool that you're fired up and you're just trying to stay one step ahead of those bigger corporations that are finally, as you said, seeing the light, which is probably annoying, right? Yeah. So I usually ask guests what got them started, and usually, kind of sides on one of two reasons. And the first is that they woke up one day with a passion to start their businesses, and the second is that they felt that they no longer wanted to make another founder rich or wealthy, or kind of build, be employed by someone where they would show up to that workplace and have to fit into a culture that didn't value, as we were talking about before, just their whole authentic selves. They had to cover some aspect of who they are. And you talked a lot about the passion piece, so that's very clear. But I'm curious, you had a background working at Google, which prides itself in its culture. But I'm wondering, did you feel at any point working there, when you were thinking about your passion, you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm leaving this great job, were you also kind of excited about leaving a culture, even as great as, on the outside it seems like it's great, but I'm curious what your take is on that.
It definitely was my dream job. I got my dream job, and I loved working there. I would go back anytime. I think what I loved most about being there is that it was the first time I could walk into an office every morning and know that I was working with people who wanted to be there, versus most places I worked at, people just went for the paycheck. At Google, like, people were excited to do what they do, and they were innovative and like always trying to come up with new ideas. And that's the kind of person that I am, so for me, it's like, I want to work with those type of people. As far as like leaving, it was very hard to leave. Definitely. I mean, not only leaving the financial stability of it, or the perks of working at such an amazing company, or the health benefits. I mean, I was able to finally like get my top surgery and get my hysterectomy, all because of that insurance, and they were so amazing with the service in which they helped me, like, guide me through that whole process, from like literally from Google end all the way to the insurance end. And I'm so grateful for that. But I also knew that, like, at that time I was like 38, 37. And I knew that I was still single, no children, no risks in terms of, like, if I took the risk, I wasn't going to affect anybody else. So I knew as a child, I always wanted to make the shoes, or just even clothing. Like, I think it was something I was very passionate about, because I always loved men's styles. But I just was always like unable to take that leap, because I always wanted to work. I was a workaholic for 20 years. I never took vacation. So at this point, I was like, you know what? I've now worked at my favorite company that I've ever wanted to work for. I feel like I've checked off a lot of bucket list items. Now what about these other items that I've not been able to do? So when I told them that I was going to leave and pursue this whole new life, like fulfilling like my own like health needs, personal needs, travel, And then research and development on the shoes, everybody was really supportive. And, I look back and I miss it. I miss it a lot. And like, I would love to go back and be able to do that like on the side and do this,
Yeah.
but I need to focus.
Yeah. And so you talked about this amazing culture at Google. I mean, you're talking about healthcare benefits that so many other companies still have to catch up, and a culture that was really welcoming. What did you learn from that experience, or even other experiences that weren't as inclusive and as affirming, that influence how you shape your business? So whether you're contracting out or people that you hire, how are you taking the good from Google and maybe like leaving out some of the bad from the other places that you worked at?
I think previous to Google, I always felt anxiety about being my authentic self. Like there was always something about like a wall. I always had a little wall up, or big wall, depending. And I would get very anxious when I wanted to speak my mind. And I think at Google, they really fostered this culture of like, speak your mind, don't be afraid, and like you're your own boss, basically, And so I think that being there for 3 years really taught me to embrace my voice. And so when I left and I started this company, and like walking into shoe manufacturing, factories or whatever suppliers that make up the shoe industry who have been doing it for maybe hundreds of years, it's very hard to come in as like trans presenting and a minority and like, I wasn't sure. I knew like the moment I walked in, I remember the first factory I walked into, everybody stopped and they all like stared and like whispered. And I knew at that moment, I was like, I could easily like kind of like go back to like hiding in my shell and like putting that wall up and just pretending even to be like just maybe like a lesbian instead, like that would make it slightly easier, like more digestible for them. But I knew like in that split second, I had to make a choice. And because I did not want to live a life of not being authentic anymore, that I was very vocal. I almost went like the opposite, like I am trans. I've, had surgery. Please refer to me as so-and-so, like, and really had to step up like my expectations of what it means for their culture. And it's a very like machismo culture. So I also had to like battle with myself, like, what does that mean? Like, to be a man. I had to really clarify and explain to them like what my identity is, and that like I'm not a man, but I am trans, and I'm non-binary and I'm fluid, but this is what I'm doing. And so I think I really threw them for a loop.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I know that's a vulnerable moment. Yeah. And, I want to shift a little bit more and talk about the identity pieces and how it shows up in your work. And you've kind of already, it's a nice segue. And kind of in that moment, or even in other moments where you might be working with contractors, or your business is so unique in that you're attracting people that are may identify as trans or non-binary, really want the shoes and the products that you're selling, and other folks too, outside of cisgender people and straight people. But I'm curious, have you ever felt unsafe or just nervous about the work that you're doing where it could compromise your bottom line? And the reason why I'm asking is that there's a lot of people who listen to the show who are thinking about starting out, starting their own businesses. And one is just kind of the fear of starting your own business and everything that comes along with that. But two is then thinking about, how out can I be in this business? Should I be out at all? Do I have to cover aspects of my gender identity or my sexual orientation? So I'm just curious, like, if you can think of an example. And
I think it's kind of a catch-22 sometimes, or like chicken or the egg. I'm not quite sure which one. Sometimes it's both. I think when I did my Kickstarter campaign, which is how I started, being out and being, very upfront about my identity helped probably my campaign, because it was about community. And so when I reached to my own community, obviously, like it's, to your advantage to be as authentic as possible because you're part of that community. But on the other hand, it also, I think, in looking back, it probably might have held my brand back a little bit, because it became kind of pigeonholed into like a queer brand. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it made a lot of mainstream people think that they couldn't wear my stuff because they weren't queer or they weren't part of the community. And to me, my answer would be, well, then you missed the whole point. You know? But that's a common misconception. I mean, even people, I think, in the community would think like, oh, you're making men's shoes for women. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, that's absolutely not what I'm doing. Because if I did that, I would be a hypocrite. The whole point is I don't want to discriminate anymore, because we need to stop segregating people and like preventing them and limiting them from expressing themselves authentically just because of their expression or their gender. So that's why, like, for me, it's like, as I'm building my brand more and more, I'm trying to not lose the identity of its queerness, because I'm proud of it. And I know that is the inspiration, right? That is the life, that's the experience. But I also want it to be just a little bit more open to the idea, like, you know, let's all change our perspectives. Like, my goal is not to only change mainstream straight cis people's perspectives. Like, we all need to change perspectives and learn and grow. And like, if we open up our minds, then, you know, we have a better chance of getting other people to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that response. And I really like the branding around your shoes, where you're talking about gender equal, right? So there's nothing exclusionary about that, right? So I liked what you said, where if you feel excluded, you're missing the whole point.
Right.
So one of the other questions I like to ask my guests is just thinking about all of the experiences that you've had in coming out and being your authentic self. You know, there's obviously unique experiences of falling under the trans and non-binary umbrella, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not always easy, and often you have to fight, and often have to fight with people who are telling you that you're not who you are, right? Or which is annoying. And so I'm just curious, you know, with those experiences, how do you see those lived experiences as assets to being a business owner?
That's a tough question. How do I see the struggle of that experience benefiting, or
maybe the struggle, the liberation, however you want to frame it, but just kind of because of those unique experiences and because of some of the specific skill sets that you have to run a business, do you see that as translatable or transferable in any way?
I mean, definitely, yes, because I mean, I'm basically like, I run everything myself, right? I do a one-man show, but I feel like, I don't know, it's like, maybe like you said, like, I'm a creative entrepreneur, so therefore, like, it's less about like the running of the business or the success of the business in a business perspective. Like, for me, everything is about heart. Everything is about emotions and relationships, right? And so I think part of like the struggle of being authentic, and, you know, all the obstacles and challenges and pain and stress of being who I am, it translated in the sense of like, it like makes you wake up feeling full, you know what I mean? And I think in my business, it's kind of the same way. It's like, I might not have everything that I want in life. So I don't have everything I want in this business. It's not exactly like where I want it to be yet, but I know I'll get there. And I think that's kind of like the struggle with life too, right? It's like, every day can be a struggle, but it's still a beautiful day because you're still exactly where you want to be. And even though you're not achieving exactly what you want to be achieving, you're still there and you're still living it. You're living your truth. And it's still like a beautiful world. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to explain it except like that's how it translates for me.
Yeah, I think you did. That's beautiful. Okay. You did a great job explaining that. And so for our listeners, there's many people they're either doing a side hustle or they're still kind of doing the 9-to-5. They want to start their businesses. What kind of advice would you give them, whether they're still an employee for someone else or they're about to get started, around being their authentic selves, you know, considering some of the challenges that you described, but also, you know, obviously the liberation that kind of comes with that. You know, what would be something you really want listeners to hone in on and remember as they...
I think the one thing that I've definitely, in looking back, realized, like, whether I did the right steps or the wrong steps, is that one is I chose to kind of give up everything to pursue this because I'm kind of an all-in kind of person, you know? So I knew that anything that I wanted to, that was worth doing for me, is I wanted to give 110%. Of course, now that like, over 2 years has passed, I realized that that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for 100% of the time, because I'm also an incredibly efficient and great multitasker and I work very fast. So, and I think for me personally, I recognize that I can probably do a side job or do something else that pays the bills and do this at the same time. So I think a lot of people don't take the leap to become an entrepreneur because they're afraid of that risk of like, well, am I have a paycheck or am I going to sift through my savings? And I think that if you're interested in starting something, then you have to just ask yourself, like, how much of it do you want to give yourself? And number two is like, how comfortable are you with taking risks and like maybe changing your lifestyle? Maybe you don't spend as much money, or like going into your savings. Those are all things that we have to ask ourselves before we make these decisions. And if at any point I think that people aren't comfortable with something, then they have to make sure they don't do that, because you don't ever want to like look back and regret like, oh, I did it this way. You have to go into it and just feel good about what you did, fail or succeed, because like they said, 80% of businesses fail.
Yeah.
And that's like frightening to me. I'm like, oh, well, am I going to be that 20%? But I think you just have to go into it not being afraid to fail, and you're doing it for the right reasons then.
Yeah, definitely you have to have some risk aversion,
right?
Because there's a lot that comes with that. But I really liked what you said around, you're an all-in kind of person where it's the commitment, right? And that you're probably focusing a good maybe 80, 90, 99% of your day, like, right, I'm going to build this, I'm going to make it super successful. So definitely like really good advice for those listening. A lot of businesses or a lot of folks that I interview give back to communities, LGBT communities in different ways. And so I'm curious, is that something that is a value of your business? And I mean, you're already giving the gift of gender equal shoes to us. But what are some other ways that you've thought about, when my business is, raking in the millions, how are you giving back now, or how do you plan to give back?
I was actually just having this conversation with somebody I met at one of the conferences, one of the meetings, and realizing that like, even though like I look back and I think when I worked at Google, I really thrived on having the leverage of like, being the lead in Los Angeles Gaglers, and having a budget where I could like spend Google's money
right.
and help these nonprofit organizations. And now as a small business, not having that kind of same ability, financially to donate as much as I used to. But then as I was talking to him about it, I realized I've been on the committee for an Evening with Women, which is part of the LA LGBT Center's annual concert to raise money for LGBT women and girls for 8 years. Cool. We raise over $600,000 a year for women and girls in our community, right? Yeah. I've been helping the Trans Latina Coalition. I donate, when I had my Kickstarter, I donated like 8 pairs of shoes to the youth center at the LGBT center. I donate, probably like over 20% of my income from the sales back to different nonprofit organizations within our community all over the United States, whether it's from like donations to like certificates for raffles or, silent auctions, things like that. I mean, it definitely, I think my passion for giving so much, sometimes like, I think this past year when we were doing the taxes with my accountant, I was like, oh, I think I gave more than I should because I didn't make that much, like I'm still a new business. So I'm actually not making enough to sustain yet. But like, I think I don't even think about that when I'm giving, because that's just part of who I am. Because I think, what's it all for if you can't give? What is any of this for? So yeah, I mean, that's something that's very important to me. My goal would be like, when I am extremely successful financially, is that I want to be able to donate all over the world, whether it's from actual shoes for the youth or seniors to actual like monetary donations or setting up a fund. Like, those are things that are definitely my long-term goals.
Yeah, that's huge. I've gone to a lot of business conferences, and I feel like where I've heard that things that often pop up is if you get into the habit of giving, even before you're, bringing in a lot of profit, that vision that you have, when you are, making a huge profit, I mean, that's just going to grow exponentially. And so, I mean, and you're already doing so much now. So I just want to thank you for everything you're doing in LA and beyond. So we're going to take a really quick sponsorship break. And for our listeners, please don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're going to get to know NiK just a little bit better and learn how to stay in touch with NiK after today's conversation.
HR and diversity professionals. Are you struggling with engaging LGBTQ talent? Do you stay awake at night worrying about limiting litigation risks? Have you considered seeking support around these concerns, but just aren't sure where to turn? Look no further. Rhodes Perry Consulting offers you solutions with the Engaging LGBTQ Talent A to Z certification. This proven 4-week mentorship program delivers skills, offers support, and connects you with other professionals committed to transforming themselves and their workplaces. Learn more about this cutting-edge program by visiting rhodesperry.com and use the promo code RPC for a 10% discount. Take action and visit rhodesperry.com.
Welcome back, Outbosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know NiK just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way to stay in touch with NiK after today's conversation. So, NiK, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
All right, shoot.
You got it. Okay. So in one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
It means to bring my whole self to work. It means to face my reality every day without any fear and just to be who I am.
I love that. I'm thinking of a clothing brand in the 80s called No Fear. Do you remember that? Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, so for younger listeners, sorry. Okay, so and what's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
Probably the fact that I really question when I make decisions and when I do things, I really introspect a lot, and I really review like my actions and my words, and I make sure that like at every step of the way that when I do speak, like I speak with intention, that I'm present, and that, I'm staying authentic to myself, not only just to other people, but to myself.
Yeah, that's huge. The self-reflection and presence in a world where we get distracted after 6 seconds.
Right.
Anything. I think that's a really great quality of a leader. And so name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
Search. That's like the one thing, SEO and search, I'm like, I can't even seem to grasp it.
Yeah. And for non-techie people, just Google SEO and you'll understand. It's a whole other world. Okay, so this is a question that some listeners have been kind of encouraging me to ask of guests, and that's about the current presidential administration, the administration I call number 45 in terms of our president. So I'm curious, from your perspective, do you view this administration as one that is harmful to LGBT businesses or one that galvanizes us?
Ooh, I mean, it's like a double-edged sword in that way, like where it is completely harmful to our community, but at the same time, because of its harm, it's forcing all of us to band together and work harder together to fight the inequalities and I mean, just sheer insanity, really.
Yeah. I think we've seen what is possible, and we have more to lose as many communities that fall under the rainbow umbrella, and none of us want to be pushed back into the closet, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we've worked so hard to be where we're at, and sometimes it's almost like I turn on the news and I just want to shut it off because I'm in disbelief that it's even happening and that it's allowed to happen every day. Yeah. And it's only been 7 months, and you think there's 3.5 more years of this. Like, how is it possible that this can just carry on?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. And I think like what we're learning from this conference is just the power that we as larger LGBT communities have when we stick together, and just from a business perspective, how we can leverage our voices to just push back and remind people that we're creating jobs, we're creating economic opportunity, especially for our own community members, which is huge. So 2 more questions for you. So the first is, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
I think for me, the best advice well, I don't know if it was I received or I was kind of reconfirmed, was when I was in college and I wanted to get this on-campus job really badly at the telecommunications center, basically rewinding videotape. And I walked up these stairs that were insane, like up a mountain every day for like 2 weeks. And the guy was like, no, we're not hiring. And then finally, like after 2 weeks, he just looked at me. He was like, you're just not going to quit. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's like, okay, you got the job, you know? And he's like, you're so persistent. And I think from that moment on, I learned persistence is everything. And don't let anyone discourage you or tell you can't do something. You know, when they told me that, like, you're not going to succeed in these shoes because someone would have done it already if it was possible, I said, you know what? Let me find out, you know? And I think that is the best thing you can do for yourself is like, you have a goal, try it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That grit, that persistence is, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying about commitment and just kind of, you can see it in your mind and that power of visualization and you knew you were going to work there.
Yeah.
2 weeks up and down, you probably got some great, calves or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Whatever
I got in great shape.
That's awesome. Okay. So before we go, Nick, and I'm loving our conversation, so I hope we can talk more after this. So can you let us know how we can stay in touch with you and learn a little bit more about your business and find where we can get our gender equal shoes?
Sure.
I'm excited about that.
I have an online boutique website, www.nikkacy.com, and spell that NiKKacy.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, all social medias as NiK Kacy Footwear. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So all of that will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So for Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Nick. So as a next step, check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversations, subscribe to the podcast, and consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.